episode 241 of the White Cat Outdoors podcast, bring you to the table while we talk about the outdoors. This is part one of a three-part series where the hosts, myself, Frank, and Tom, are diving in a little bit deeper into some topics or debates in the whitetail world. This is kind of a little different spin on what our podcast is typically about, but we each selected a different topic to dive deeper into to get some more information and help, make us better hunters, better woodsmen, and whatnot. So this week was Tom, and Tom brought up deer management. So basically looking at your deer herd, the property you hunt, and what sort of things you can do to improve the quality of life for the deer on your property, improve the habitat, and maybe a few things that the consensus through maybe forums or other podcasts maybe differ from a little bit of what Tom found through different studies that have been done throughout the U.S. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as Tom did researching it. But I'm going to quit rambling and let's get tuned in to this week's episode.
And then I looked dead at his antlers. I got out of the truck, and when I slammed the door, I heard gobbles all around me.
Let's see it.
Alaska, moose, spot and stalk. That is the bucket list. I agree.
White Cat Outdoors. White Cat Outdoors.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the table. Tom's mostly going to talk about the outdoors tonight. The end of last week's episode, we kind of alluded to what we were going to do for the next couple weeks. Talk about some debated topics, some different things that we find interesting, and want to give you guys some concrete statistics and a little bit more fact-based discussion rather than opinion-based. So
Yeah,
that's what we're going for tonight. So Tom's going to be here. Nick's here too.
absolutely.
Can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I hope it's a good
Tom, we're
episode.
happy to have you on the show this week.
Yeah, glad to be on the show. I hope it's a good educational episode for you listeners. I know through my research, I learned a lot.
Did you?
Yeah,
Good.
so I'm excited to share that knowledge. I think it could be helpful.
So do you have everything memorized? I see you don't have any notes or nothing.
No, I got it all locked in. When I read something important, it's like I just lock it in up there.
Sweet.
How
Well, I
about
can't
that?
wait to hear about it.
So what's your topic of research?
Deer management and how important is it really?
Okay.
And
So let's get
Do you mean like management as far as like buck management or like buck to doe ratio management or just the whole deal?
just all deer management, growing the best, healthiest herd of deer on your property.
So let's do this scientific method style. What is before your research, what were you expecting to find? Like, what was your hypothesis?
Before my research, I was expecting to find that the buck to doe ratio is way out of proportion and you need to be harvesting a lot of does to try and get to that perfect ideal 1-to-1 ratio. And come to find out that is not necessarily the case.
Interesting.
And as far as getting your property to its full potential, it is more about property management than actually the deer management. Deer management plays a big role into it, but it's more so based on how many total deer you have on your property. So we'll start with that. For ideal situation, I believe our New York property is far from this.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to discuss whether or not this is something we want to work towards, because there is some cons that go along with this. But the ideal deer population for the deer to get the most nutrients, the most room to grow, produce the biggest bucks. Do you guys have a guess how many deer per 100 acres?
Per 100 acres, I bet you 40.
I bet it's way less than that. I bet it's closer to like 10.
10. One deer for
Oh.
every 10 acres.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems low to me, but I 100% believe it. Like, it seems low just given the number of deer that we have, because the number.
I'm
Nick
going
said
off of
makes
what
sense.
I was going off of. It's not uncommon to see 20 some deer on a sit in rifle season on a food plot.
Yeah.
And that's the negative. If you get your property to that point, you're not going to have those entertaining hunts where you're seeing, 10, 15 deer.
Well, and you have to start looking at it. What do you want? Do you want a hunt where you sit there and you see a lot of deer, or do you want to kill a big buck?
Yeah.
And you have to kind of decide what's more important to you, or is it somewhere in between?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, you can shoot does. It does not hurt. But basically, nature has a way of keeping the sex ratio in check. You're never going to get to that 1-to-1 ratio, but over the course of time, the average ratio has stayed around 3-to-1 for years and years. And with people think, my ratio's 10-to-1. Well, no, doe are a lot more active in daylight hours, and they come into more open areas where people are typically hunting, like food plots. So they say when you're seeing 10 doe to every 1 buck, your ratio is actually more like 3-to-1.
And I guess not that I don't believe you, but just to give the listeners some background, and if they want to dig further, where are you getting this from?
Just different whitetail articles.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't write down every source. I didn't know if we were supposed to do that or not, but I read.
Okay, I just most of the stuff that I was researching came from the University of Georgia, which is kind of like, was it Missouri that also has like a really
Mississippi State
has a very strong deer program, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But Georgia State also has one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't citing sources. I mean,
Okay.
I was reading what I believe are reputable
credible sources.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I mean, a lot of the articles were sourcing, Mississippi State. I mean, it wasn't just like I wasn't reading
Wikipedia.
or like what are those threads where people just go on and
Forums.
Yeah.
I wasn't reading forums.
Archerytalk.com.
Yeah. Yeah, those are about worthless. That's
Yeah.
100% opinion based.
Yeah, no, it was all credited articles.
Mhm.
You kind of got me off track. Where were we?
You were saying, like, if you're seeing 10 does to every 1 buck, your ratio is probably more like that,
Yeah.
3-to-1.
Yeah, and you can get a more accurate buck to doe ratio. I mean, there's equations you can do with trail cam photos and whatnot where you calculate how many buck photos you got versus how many different bucks were in that. So say you got, 50 buck photos with 10 different bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting 5 or 10 bucks for every 50 photos. You multiply that and then times it really doesn't matter because your ratio is not going to vary far from 3-to-1.
Mm-hmm.
Just with
There's drone companies out now too that will do surveys of your property using heat, that you can have them come through and scan your entire property, and they'll tell you how many bucks and does you have on your farm in live time. And my
That's
guess,
interesting.
I haven't obviously haven't inquired to do that, but my guess is you would have to take a few samples throughout a year at different times.
Yeah, there's
doing,
no way
'cause there's
one
no,
evening you're going to see an accurate depiction.
Yeah, but if you did it, 4 times in a year, in each season, I feel like you could get a decent idea of what you've got on your property, like buck to doe ratios.
but basically, how they figure this is every year when does have their fawns, it's historically about a 50-50 mix of bucks and doe fawns.
Mm-hmm.
And year after year, there is slightly more bucks killed than does,
Mm-hmm.
leaving more available does to the bucks. And It's not just hunting, it's disease, it's predation, it's hit by a car, old age, just a bunch of different factors that kind of keep it right around that 3-to-1. So the biggest thing that I've found for managing your property is getting the population down to that 1 deer per every 10 acres.
That to me sounds absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it just seems like I don't physically have enough tags. We don't have enough tags
Yeah.
on hand to do that.
Mm-hmm.
No, you just have to, I don't know, have more people hunt, I guess. But they say for growing bucks, there's 3 factors. It's food, genetics, and old age.
Mm-hmm.
Genetics actually make up about the smallest part of growing a quality buck.
See, I can believe that, especially because most deer in the states we hunt, on average, are killed at 2.5 years old.
I would say in PA it's not. I would say the average is a year and a half.
You think?
I would bet the total state average is less than 2.5 for sure.
Yeah, maybe not the specific area we hunt, but
I guess what I'm getting at is that the
most
vast
bucks are
majority
not getting to their full potential.
That's what I was
No.
going to say. The majority of bucks in the states, in the areas we hunt, never reach their full potential before they're
Not
killed.
even close.
And what happens when you have such a high population of deer? Like, I think the biggest thing would not be figuring out your buck to doe ratio, but it would be figuring out how many deer are on your property.
We have more than 10 different bucks on our property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's that tell you?
So if you have 10 bucks, if the average is 3-to-1, you probably have 10 bucks and 30 doe.
Now, is that number...
That's adult deer.
Yes, but is that deer that are frequenting your property, or like that's how many deer you want to touch ground on your property? Like at any one time, should it be 10 to or 1 to 10, 1 deer for every 10 acres, or
Is that like a core area kind of thing where like the buck will regularly bed on your
like
property?
you only ever have this 1 deer showing up on this 10 acres, or is it right now there's 1 deer on this 10 acres, he's going to walk away, another one's going to come in?
It's at any given time.
Okay.
Because there's no way you can keep 1 deer to 10 acres. So
No.
it's just a generalized,
Mm-hmm.
at any given time, you have 100 acres, there's 10 deer that are,
Free or on that property right now. Those 10 deer might move out, and
and
another
then a couple
10 deer
more might come in. Yeah.
That's like literally like 2 to 3 bucks and 6 to 8 does,
Mm-hmm.
which is insane.
Yeah, that's crazy to think that that's...
Because I know for a fact that we've had 4 people hunting at the same time in archery and have seen 4 different bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So like right there, you're already over that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that being said, I guess the ideal property setup for whitetail is obviously you have to have water, you have to have food, and you have to have cover. But the ideal food to land ratio is you want 20% of your land dedicated to food to support that 1 deer for 10 acres.
Now, when you're saying 20% food, does that go deeper than just planting food plots? Does that
Yes.
count browse and...
I wouldn't count browse, but apple orchards, acorns, corn, food plots.
Because I know that like...
I mean, because browse is everywhere
Yeah.
for the most part.
That's what I was getting at, is like, because technically almost like deer browse on everything. If you watch a deer walk through the woods, they don't go very far without snapping a leaf off of a sapling here and walk a little bit. They're always chewing. It seems like if you watch a deer moving through the woods, it seems like they're always chewing on something.
And that's a big, browse is huge. I guess in general, do you guys know how much the average deer eats in a day?
Calorie-wise or poundage, like what do you... what-
Poundage.
I bet you with the amount that they're moving, I bet you they eat 3 to 5 pounds a day.
I was going to say higher,
Uh,
like 5 to 8.
So on average, a doe will eat 6 to 8% of its body weight per day, and a buck will eat 8 to 10% of its body weight in
Wow.
a day.
So 10% of a 200-pound buck, you're looking at 20 pounds of food a day,
Wow.
which
I
seems
would- that's-
insane. Because if a human, well, obviously we don't exert as much energy as a deer does, But to think that, I mean, we don't even eat 10 pounds of food a day.
No. That's wild.
I bet
Yeah.
you most people are, I bet
Couple
below
pounds.
5,
Yeah.
way below 5.
So just think, if you have, 50 deer on your 100 acres, how much food they're going through.
Yeah. That's hundreds of pounds of food every day. Hundreds,
Yeah, if you're, okay, so yeah, you look at, say 50 deer, and we're just going to go in the middle and say 5 pounds of food a day going on the low end for does.
We'll
and
just go
stuff.
right in the middle, because a doe's 6 to 8 and a buck's 8 to 10. So just call it 8% of their body weight. Average deer's 150 pounds. What's 150 pounds times 8%?
Give me 1 second.
Yeah. So,
Give a quick commercial break, would you?
but still, like, that's a huge amount of food that you need, even considering that a lot of it is
So-
browse
So that on average is about 12 pounds.
per deer.
Yeah, 8 pounds, or a 150 pound deer, 8% of their body weight is 12 pounds. If you've got 50 deer on your property, they're going through 600 pounds of food a day.
Wow.
And I don't.
So that like 50 pounds of corn that you throw out is literally nothing.
Yeah.
600 pounds a day.
So I remember when we used to throw hay. A bale of hay was what, 50 pounds?
50 to 60.
And how many bales are you getting per acre? Did anyone know how many
I don't
bales of hay you're
remember.
getting
No
in an
idea.
acre? I don't know off the top of my head. I could probably look that up just to give you an idea of, what 1 acre will feed a deer.
But I mean, you're basically like, it's the same as having a farm. If you have cows or horses, you're feeding the same thing.
They're eating generally, it's vegetation. But I guess I severely underestimated how much
Yeah,
they're going through. Like you're saying, it's like, I mean, because I don't think there's any way that we don't have 50 deer running around that 100-acre piece.
for sure, no.
I mean, with the amount of doe pictures and buck pictures we're getting, I think 50 is an accurate guesstimate. So you're saying that we're going through 600 pounds of food a day, and that's browse, that's corn, that's clover, all that stuff. But still, like, you need to have a ton of food is what I'm seeing.
To support that many deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you have ideally 100 acres with 10 deer on it, that's a lot less food. Where now that 20% of your 100 acres is plenty of food to sustain that number of
Yeah,
deer.
but if you have 50 deer, that 20%,
Well, all of a sudden you have to start taking in a higher percentage of your property has to be food, and now you're losing out on how much bedding you can have and cover.
Yeah. So they say one of the best things for a property is actually doing a selective cut like we did up in Clymer.
So we're just ahead of our time.
Yeah, we are ahead of the times. Because that does create a lot more available browse. For
Oh,
the
does
deer.
it?
Yeah.
I every time I walk down that main road on the property, you go down through the main road and you look up at that hillside, and Austin didn't get to appreciate the difference, but you guys all saw it. Back in the day, and this was only 5-6 years ago, you could walk down that main road and you could see the field that was 300 yards away up the hill. You could see it, skyline things for
plain
there.
as day.
Now, 5 years later, it is just an absolute mess all the way up through there with browse and bedding. And I mean, I don't know how many times the last couple weeks we were up there, you come walking down that main road and you just see deer everywhere through there, all over the place.
Yeah.
But that's pretty interesting stuff, actually. Like, that's way more food than I would have ever guessed needed. It makes me feel like putting 50 pounds of corn out every other week is not really doing jack shit. Like, it's bringing a deer to you, but in terms of like supplying the deer with what they need, I don't think you're really putting much of a dent.
No. I mean, have you ever... I mean, you see a deer walk through the woods, they're chewing on something.
Yeah.
I think they are pretty much constantly eating.
Yeah, that's why when you see a 4.5-year-old deer, its teeth are worn down a lot because they never stop chewing on stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but when you're gutting a deer, have you guys ever poked its stomach?
Not on purpose.
But have you done it?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Have you ever seen one empty?
Oh no, they're always 100% full.
And right there, like in 99.9, actually every time I've accidentally cut one open, it's been fresh cut. Like there's been fresh green
Yeah.
in there. So like that's just, you're not going to shoot a deer that's got nothing in its stomach. They're constantly
Yeah, even
eating.
a rutting buck, when they're doing nothing but running and food is the last thing on their mind, their stomach's still full all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very eye opening to me, because basically I've never researched deer management. I've always just listened to what the older generation has told me.
Kind of your mentors.
And another thing about the, I guess, lower number of deers, they say it makes for a more exciting rut. There's more
I have heard
competition.
that.
If you have, 30 does and 10 bucks, there's not a lot of competition. But if you have, I don't know, I say it would be 7, what would it be? An ideal, a 3-to-1 ratio, it would be $3 and 7 does. I don't know.
Roughly.
Seems like it would even out, but they say it makes it more
Yeah, but it's got to
rut.
travel that 100 acres to find 7 doe instead of 100 acres to, like each one buck has to travel 100 acres to find 7 doe versus 30. So even though the ratio is the same going down, they have to cover more ground to find even less deer.
Yeah. No, that's probably a good point. But yeah, that's the biggest thing is you could have, basically what they're saying is you could have a buck with the best possible genetics, but if he doesn't have the proper food and nutrients to grow and he doesn't get to that 4.5 years old, I mean,
The genetics.
the
are a moot
genetics
point.
really don't matter.
What's the same thing? You look at like bodybuilders and stuff and how much diet plays into their regime. Like they can work out as much as they can physically, but if they're not giving themselves the protein and the carbs that they need, they're never going to grow.
Yeah.
So if same thing with bucks, they could have the best genetics in the world. It could be Arnold Schwarzenegger of bucks, and if he's not getting the proper diet, then he's never going to reach his full potential.
Or if he gets shot at 1.5.
yeah.
That too.
So I think that from my research, that was the biggest thing I learned is that no matter how hard you want to get to that 1-to-1 ratio, it's realistically probably not going to sway very far from 3-to-1. A lot of people think that ratio is way out of skew. It's 10-to-1, 11-to-1, 12-to-1. But no, that's not the case. Nature has, been around for eternity, and it's kept this big giant rock moving through the sky, and I think it's going to do it for quite a while longer. So I think nature knows what it's doing, and it does a pretty good job at keeping the population, or not the population, the ratio
Where it
in
needs
check,
to be.
where it needs to be. The biggest thing is keeping your numbers down to where you have enough food on your property to sustain your herd of deer.
So being that we have the opportunity, we have to me it is a decent to large size piece of property. After your research, what does that change for you, and like what do you want to do differently, if anything, to benefit the property you hunt?
I think we kind of have a good program going now. The bucks have been going in the right direction. We probably have close to that 20% of our property dedicated towards food, with the food plots and the apple orchards and soon to be our nut-bearing trees.
I would be curious to see, like a mature oak tree, how many pounds of food one oak tree produces a year, to get an idea of like how many oak trees would be sufficient on a property that size. Like what we because we keep planting trees every single year knowing that not all of them are going to make it. But at the end, when we have, and I say the end is like a arbitrary timeline out there, but like at what point is it enough oak trees on the property? At what point do we not need to put any new food plots in? Like, where do we need to get to, I guess, would be my...
that sustainable amount of diverse food where you
Yes.
have, beans and corn and clover and radishes and all of the different nuts and fruits,
berry
and stuff.
trees, all that, or berry bushes. Like, it would be interesting to like find out like how much poundage of food a clover field this size produces, and like
An apple orchard this
size. And basically try and get to a point where, okay, if this is how many deer we have on our property, how much food do you actually need to hit that realm, consistently?
A mature oak tree will roughly produce 1,000 pounds per year.
So
A lot.
yeah, but that's 1,000 pounds. So you're looking at, on our property, 50 deer.
You got a day and a half.
You've
of food.
got
if they
like
eat nothing but acorns.
yeah, if they ate nothing but acorns, you got about 2 days, a day and a half to 2 days worth of food per acorn tree.
Which we've planted thousands.
Yeah. So I think I would have to agree with you that we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, we're not there yet. I think by the time our nut-bearing trees are starting to produce, it might be wise to do another selective cut.
Which we were told 10 to 15 years. By the time our trees are producing, we're going to be right around that 10 to 15 year mark, because we're about 5 years from when we did it.
Yeah.
And Tom and I, like, when we talked to the forester, we made it very clear that this was a hunting property. It's not an investment piece where we needed to, pull X amount of dollars out of this property. Everything we do on this property is for the deer.
wildlife.
Yeah, it's for wildlife in general, but I would say it goes about 85% whitetail, 15 or 10% turkey, and then 5% general wildlife. Like, we chose to leave some junk trees, if you will, in quotations, because it's what turkeys like to roost in, like the beech trees. As from a forester standpoint, beech trees are junk. Get rid of them. They're stealing nutrients from the ground.
They have
But
a
if-
big canopy that blocks a lot of
Yes, but if
sunlight.
you're into turkey hunting and you notice if you've got beech trees on your property, turkeys are going to roost in them. And we explained that to the guy, and he was like, yes, for the purpose of this property, I would suggest leaving your beech trees. He said if this was just a piece that you guys were trying to maximize profit on, then yeah, get rid of your beech trees right now. So I think it's important, if you're going to get extremely serious about your property management, to work with an educated forester and not just have a logger come in, because it makes a huge difference on what types of trees they're going to take out, how many they're going to take out, and how often. Because I feel like you can only do so much with like a tractor and a rototiller for your property. Like, putting food plots in is great, but if you're going to go full bore, I feel like you're going to have to get help when it comes to the forestry side. Because we can go and take some trees down, but you need the heavy equipment.
Well,
you
and
need,
like Tom was saying, you want 20% of your property to be food. So that leaves a whole lot of area that's going to be either trees or swamp or creek or whatever. So you have a lot of trees. There's a lot of land. 80% of your land is going to be probably wooded. So you can't neglect that 80%.
yeah.
You have to pay attention to it and manage it as hard as you're managing the 20% for food plots and whatever else.
Yeah. But I guess to answer your question is where I would like to go with the property. It's as much as I like deer management. I like the idea of it. But with our 115 acres, I don't think it's quite enough to go full bore on deer management, because we have so much surrounding property that we don't have access to
Or control over.
Yeah, you'd have to get all your neighbors on board, because what's going to happen is we shoot a deer on our property. Essentially, that opens up a spot for another one to move in. You would have to get 5,000 to 10,000 acres of connecting property on board, where those deer aren't leaving that 5,000-10,000 acres.
I think what's important, because like I said, I wouldn't call it a like huge chunk of property, but if you can produce a property that has everything a deer needs, and you can basically, because like you said, you can't make it stay on 115 acres. A deer is going to travel off of that. But if you can provide everything that it does need on that piece, the amount that they're going to frequent that property is, I think, going to be a lot more than just a piece that they're, coming through on a whim. Because when we first started hunting up there, we would see deer in archery, and then by rifle season, you were lucky to see much of anything. It was a ghost town by the time snow hit. And just over the years of improving the property, we have started to see deer later and later and later into the season. And I think that that's due to making sure that there's plenty of what they need and have full access to it.
All of that has nothing to do with deer management, but the property management end of things.
Yeah.
But if you look at our 100 acres, there's 4 core guys that hunt it. If every year we had a very successful year, everybody killed 2 deer. So that's 8 deer off the property. That doesn't get us anywhere near that 1 deer per 10 acres.
No.
And then what happens the next year is more fawns are born than what were killed the year before.
Yeah.
So I think we would be beating a dead horse if we tried doing that. I personally, I'm very happy, with a 16, 17-inch wide 8-point. We've been getting, what in my mind, 3.5s, maybe the occasional 4.5-year-old on camera. Nobody has killed one up there yet. But I think, in a relatively near future, it will happen where somebody puts a big bruiser like that on the ground. And I'm very happy with maintaining that. I like going out and seeing 10 deer per hunt. It makes it entertaining.
And like you said, without getting 10,000 acres of neighbors on board with one plan, you're not going to make a difference on that small of a piece of property. So you need to take that into consideration with your management.
Yeah, I think I guess in conclusion, the best thing you can do is not so much manage the deer population, because realistically, with the small parcels of land we have, you're not going to be able to do that. The biggest thing you can do is manage your property and put the right food sources on to give the deer the nutrients to reach their full potential. Because if you have, enough deer and enough food, eventually, you're going to start getting some more bucks that get to that 3 years old, 4 years old, where they really start showing their full potential.
I agree.
And if you have all those things, there's going to be that caliber of buck in every square. There's usually a buck like that's going to frequent every square. So if you can give him more reason to be on your 100 acres, he's traveling on 5,000 acres. But if he wants to spend the majority of his time near you, then you're just maximizing the opportunities you have at harvesting that bigger deer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but last year, that 10 that I saw in archery season, like 2 days before you killed your 8, maybe I would say maybe the first confirmed deer above 2.5 years old that we've seen on the hoof. We've got pictures of deer as big or bigger than that one, but based on his body size and everything, I would say that there's no way that was a 2.5-year-old deer.
So we've never killed anything over 2.5.
No, we haven't. But I know from pictures that we've got deer that are older than that.
Oh, for sure.
And that may or may not be one of the first sightings we've seen, like, on stand. I had a really good 50-yard open field look at this deer. Like, it wasn't like a quick glimpse through the timber. What I'm getting at is it's getting better up there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We say it every year in camp that it's only a matter of time before somebody blows out the number one like out of the water.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough to keep that one in camp.
Yeah.
Because as of right now, every single buck that's been killed there goes on the wall. And it's going to be very tough to convince whoever does it They kill a 130-inch deer to,
Leave it up at the cabin.
yeah. I might.
I know I won't.
Yeah,
I'll bring it up.
It'll be like one of those like traveling trophies.
Yeah.
Well, at the very least, then, if that's what happens, we need to get a good framed picture on the wall. But yeah. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you diving into this deer management topic for us.
Yeah.
I actually learned more than I thought I would.
I did too.
And that's not a jab at you. It was just I figured I had a pretty good idea.
You probably thought it was just doe proportions were way out of whack. You got to harvest the does. That's what I thought.
That's the biggest thing that people talk about when they're talking about deer management is getting that buck to doe. That's 90% of what you hear is buck to doe ratio, and
that ratio is not going far from 3 to 1.
yeah,
I think the biggest takeaway for me was the amount of food that a deer goes through. And basically, like, if you can provide all of that food on your property, that's what would help keep them there. Because if it needs, that amount of food every single day, if it's not on your property, they're forced to go somewhere else. So it shows me like how difficult it truly is. You think you're doing everything right. No, we can hold deer. But if you're not providing that amount of food, it's impossible for a deer to stay on your property.
yeah,
So the best way, at least from what I'm hearing, the best way to keep a deer on your property is providing as much of that food as possible, because, without food, they cannot survive. And, so like, and that sounds stupid to say out loud, but like, it's true.
Well, food and cover.
Yeah.
Because deer will move far from cover to get to their food source.
Yeah.
Like, that's like you hear people saying all the time, like, oh, they get pictures of this buck on camera, but they only see him at 2, 3 in the morning. And a lot of people that study trail cameras will say, oh, that's a buck that they're not even going to even consider hunting, because that deer probably lives 3, 4 miles away.
Yeah.
he's just walking over there because that's where he wants to eat, and he's gonna go way the hell over there to lay down, and you're never gonna see him in daylight hours because he's not on your property in daylight hours, and he's never gonna be.
Yeah, so you need you need food to get the deer there eating, and you need cover to hold them there.
So they say, oh, why, I keep traveling all this way every single night, but there's actually a spot right over there that looks pretty nice, room and board, ready to go.
Yeah, I just got
Wi-Fi included.
Walk down the bottom of this hill, cross the creek, and I got all the food I need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Very interesting, Tom.
yeah. So thanks. Hope you guys learned something. Hope our listeners learned something.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you again. This was the first of a 3-part series on diving deep into some topics that we found interesting. We hope you guys enjoyed this as we get closer to deer season. But you guys know what to do. Get outside.